Hello and welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers, the podcast for those curious about creating a more fulfilling work life. Every business boils down to two basics, people and money. Here we focus on the human side. Numbers matter, but people matter most, and people drive performance. I'm Susan Nichriadon, your host, a coach, consultant, facilitator and author of Leading Beyond the Numbers. It brings me joy to speak to people and explore together how, although we share many similarities as humans, each of us navigates the world through our own unique lens. This adds intricacy to our interactions and contributes to both the depth and difficulties of interpersonal relationships. Join us for stories, strategies, and insights to help you lead your life beyond the numbers. Well, today I am delighted to welcome Martin Murphy to Life Beyond the Numbers, and I am going to call you Murph.
Cool. Hello,
You're
Susan.
very welcome. Now, Murph,
Yeah.
I came across a post on LinkedIn that spurred me to get in touch with you, and it was something that John Shinnick, who had been on this podcast quite some time ago, episode 42, he posted, and it was about wild coaching.
Yeah.
And he mentioned how he spent time in the hills with you and he always comes back with something added. And I just thought that was such a lovely jumping off point. So maybe you talk to me a little bit about walking and wild coaching.
Right. Okay. Well, he's a bit of a legend, John Shinnick, anyway, isn't he? So in the Manchester community. Yeah. Wild coaching. There's a lot more of it going on. I think it seems to be the in thing. I started a long time ago doing this, finding the benefit of being outdoors. But basically, it's about promoting wisdom and well-being by walking and talking in nature. It started for me kind of probably about 20 years ago. I kind of finished with the military security world. I got bored of that. And I went to university and got a degree in environmental studies and outdoor pursuits. I thought I'd probably be able to go and join Greenpeace or something like that and get on those boats and do all that exciting stuff. Anyway, they told me to sod off, basically. So I thought, what can I do? And whilst I was waiting, I started doing some personal training, and it tended to be business owners. And as I learned NLP and coaching and other forms of psychology, mainly to sort my own problems out from a dysfunctional childhood. But yeah, I started chatting to people, and what they were finding more beneficial wasn't me kind of beating them up and down football fields trying to get them fit. They actually liked it when we went for a walk around the golf course. It was around Mottram Hall at the time. And that got me thinking, well, actually, yeah, there's something in this idea that you take people outdoors, and as a result of that, it free up their mind. I talk a lot about flow states. You know, this flow states are these optimal states that you get into. You feel kind of relaxed, but it's really focused. You're liberated. You kind of lose yourself. And it's actually down to a thing called hypotransient frontalis, but you lose track of time, you lose yourself in whatever you're doing. You have this optimal grip on reality and yourself. So you seem just to be able to find the right answers at the right time. And it leads to more deeper wisdom, if you like, because it's kind of like an extended aha moment. And this is all caused by the fact that you're actually doing something. We're designed to move. We should be doing about 25 paces daily. That was the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. And we actually think better when we're moving. There's loads of studies coming out now about increasing brain endurance. So if you actually do some physical exercise and you think about a challenge, it actually builds better brain resilience. So the walking gets you into a resourceful state. You're outdoors. I mean, it's hidden in our language. We tend to look down at phones and things like that. So it's like downright sad is where we tend to look, and that's how we feel. If things are brighter, if things are looking up, brighter. We know that quite a lot of people who are creative, for instance, might be promoted and put in a corner office, and they wonder why they can't create these more creative visual things, ideas, because they're stuck in a corner office. So yeah, you take people outdoors, they get into a resourceful state, you're able to explore more. You can use nature. I call it wayfinding, just like you use a compass and things like that. So you can use the path you're on as a metaphor. And because you're outdoors, you can stay inquisitive longer. Because you're outdoors, it helps you shift from left brain into right brain. Dr. Ian McGilchrist has revisited this idea of left and right, the asymmetrical brain. He says that the actual corpus callosum acts as an inhibitor. So if you're stuck in one side, the left tends to be very competitive and controlling, and it likes certainty. So you jump to conclusions a bit quicker. Whereas when we're doing this, you're able to stay inquisitive longer. And so there's this liberation then. You're hoping to free them from fixed thinking or, mental sclerosis, I suppose, fixed ideas and things like that. And it just increases the ecology of mind. Most decision-making models, whether it be plan, do, check, adapt, OODA loops, and even the GROW model is goal. Hold on, let me do it. What's the goal? What's the reality? Divergent. Which option are you going to choose the way forward? It's all divergent, convergent, and emergent, and they all follow that pathway. OODA loop just goes faster. So you're going down this fixed thinking way, competitive, quicker. And because we want to be in the left brain, and Dr. Ian McGilchrist says that we've created this left brain world, capitalism, all that sort of thing. So yeah, if you can get people out of it, you can't do it straight away. I noticed this working with people like the fire service and other clients, leaders who were trying to talk about well-being on one-to-ones. They'd say, so how are you doing? How do you feel? I feel fine. Because obviously no one likes talking about that. So they just go straight back to, right, so okay, let's have a look at your numbers. And the reason for that, of course, is the fact that it's actually difficult. It takes time. You've got to build rapport up for one thing, get into a resourceful state. But it takes time because the corpus callosum, once we're in one side, it stays there. And really what we're trying to do is develop this other side, which is more the right side. And as a result of that, it's like Gregory Bateson's idea of ecology of mind. You start seeing us thinking as an ecosystem, and we can be more coherent, and that's what we're looking for. So like the peripatetics, I think they're called, the idea of the Lyceum, and Aristotle started this. He used to take his students outdoors and walking. So it's not a new idea. It's been around for centuries, and yeah, it just works.
It just works. And I think instinctively, Murph, we know that because oftentimes somebody will say, I need to go outside to clear my head, or I'm going to go for a walk and figure this out. So that movement and that outdoors it's in us.
Yeah.
And sometimes the wisdom just kind of takes over and says, that's what you need.
Yeah.
Does it surprise people though? Because it sounds like a luxury when I need to be focused on the numbers or whatever it might be in a workplace. And then suddenly I meet Murph and he says, come on, we're going for a walk.
Well, there's a few things there. If you're in a flow state, so like McKinsey have done work on this, and they've realized that executives are 5 times more effective. So you just can't be in a flow state all the time. So that's one thing. The act of walking actually acts a bit like EMDR. It's like this bilateral movement. It encourages bilateral thinking. So as a result of that, you bring more of your brain, if you like, the more of yourself to the problem, if you're facing a problem or understanding a problem. And because you're in a flow state, when you do come to look at the numbers, you'll probably be more spot on. You'll be probably more effective as a result of that. Yeah, it's like a reset, isn't it? You're resetting your brain. One of the things about flows is 4 states to flow. And what people do, you might have come across this idea where you've had a really good day. You understand this flow state because you've just had this optimal grip, as I say, and you've achieved lots off your to-do list. And then you come in the next day and go, or you think to yourself, right, I'm going to have another good day like that. You do exactly the same thing, do your to-do list, and you just can't get into it. And the reason for that is because you are suffering from what's known as a flow hangover. And it's partly due to glutamate, which is one of the neurotransmitters in the brain that allows for focused thinking. And so it would make you better with the numbers. And the old glutamate is still stuck in your brain cells, and you need to flush it out. And the way to do it is sleep well, but also exercise. So it's kind of like an active recovery. So it comes down to that idea of sharpening the axe. You'll be more effective if you're able to have little breaks and to do some active recovery.
Completely. And I have never heard that term flow hangover before. And it puts to mind, it's not the circadian rhythm, but it's one of those rhythms. And I started to work like that for quite a while. I was writing a book and doing 90 to 120 minutes of real focus work, and then a 20-minute active recovery, which generally involved going outside. Yeah. And it was fascinating how I could get right back into that state then again, as long as it was active recovery. I think that's the difference, isn't it?
Absolutely,
and whether if you're scrolling on your phone or watching TV, that's just passive. And I think a lot of the times we think that to relax, we need to be sitting down or doing something passive, when actually the R&R, the relaxation and recovery, having an activity is much better for us, isn't it?
Yes, funnily enough, before the pandemic, I was over in the Middle East. We were actually teaching intelligence agents about leadership, and they had, I can't really tell you where it is and all that sort of thing, but it consisted of us giving lectures, 40-minute lectures in a big hall all together, and then we would walk the students to various other rooms. And one of the hierarchy thought, well, can we not just condense this and just keep them in the room for 8 hours a day type of thing? And I explained to them, well, no, actually, walking, the largest muscles in the body are the gluteus maximus, the leg and backside muscles. When you're walking, you're flushing and getting the brain, getting the blood pumping around. And as a result of that, this active recovery means that when they go to have the smaller group discussions about the theory that you've just been talking about, they'll be more effective in that state. So yeah, and they were walking and talking as they were going as well. So yeah, it's a much more coherent way of approaching thinking, if you like, is to be able to move.
It is, and yet we don't do it enough.
Well, gosh, watch out, I could get on my soapbox here. Well, of course not, no, because industrial revolution thinking is that we've tried to make people, well, I haven't, but the whole idea behind the industrial revolution was to create technology. Technology is always a tool to acquire power of a resource and replace people. So the plow took over from like 10 jobs, and then the tractor 100 jobs, and that so on. And so that's been increased all the time. But the thing is, now we've got to the point where we can be more human. In fact, we need to get back to being more human, because we don't need widgets anymore. Industry doesn't need widgets, it needs humans. We've got all the technology we want now. We can replace as many humans as we want. So now we're going to find other ways to be more human. I think the thing that I say that capitalism got wrong is the fact that capitalism is all about competition, but it's ideas that compete, whereas people should collaborate. And collaboration was our evolutionary advantage. And what makes us better at thinking is to move and think at the same time, most of the time.
Most of the time. And that's a lovely segue, actually, to the rest of that post that I talked about at the beginning that John Shinnick reposted, because you said something that's very, very dear to my thinking as well. And that was that future sustainable success depends on human intelligence as much as artificial intelligence. And are we in fear of throwing the baby, our human nature, out with the digital bathwater? And I won't say it's something that keeps me up at night, but it certainly is one of those things that I have a big focus on, because that human intelligence, we haven't even touched on it here almost. We've kind of ventured a little bit into it, but we're capable of so much more. And I
Yeah.
listened to a podcast episode that you talked about collective intelligence.
Mm.
And that's something that we will never get unless we collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As we find with AI and robotics, I mean, AI just de-skills us and just takes away our intelligence. I wrote a book about 5-7 years ago now, I think it is. And I said, much like the special forces model, but also how hunter-gatherers operate. And also people like Steve Jobs did the same thing, which was to create these small teams at the liminal edges who were able to collaborate at a higher level and have more agency and autonomy, mutual accountability, alignment to the mission and purpose. And in doing so, they became highly effective. But we always call them special project teams or special forces or whatever you want to call it. They always thought that was special. But actually, no, that's just how humans are supposed to operate. And we lost that for a while with the Industrial Revolution and factory farming and factory everything else and factory humans. If you're being de-skilled because you're just relying more and more on technology, you're going to find yourself at some point out of work. And also, what have you got left? Well, the only thing, go back to our evolutionary advantage, which was collaboration.
Hmm. And that's a really interesting point about the special projects and the special ops and special forces and so on. Because I heard somebody talking about this recently in relation to athletes.
Mm.
Because athletes, I guess, are people that normal people, day-to-day people understand go into flow state or the zone or whatever they call it. And how all of them, well, somebody wrote a book, and the people that he spoke to had all had extraordinary experiences in this flow state by accessing their own intelligence in a way that they weren't aware of before that and were unhappy or unwilling to talk about it because it wasn't something that was talked about. So it was seen as special. When actually, that could be the ordinary
Yeah.
if more of us were able to access that part of us, because it's there for us all.
Yeah, absolutely. The health benefits are massive from this kind of thinking. I mean, everyone knows that people that do run and do keep fit, they feel great afterwards. You know, they think it's down to endorphins that the run is high, but it's actually that endorphins is just almost like a painkiller. It doesn't pass the blood-brain barrier. What it is a substance called anandamide, which comes from the Sanskrit word anand, meaning bliss, the bliss molecule. But basically, it attaches to the THC receptors in your brain and allows the brain to, disparate parts tend to connect more. So by going for a walk, there's loads of different things that are released and lots that's going on. But that's one of the major ones, and that's where the bliss idea comes from. But it's also connecting your brain. I mean, basically, it's like smoking. You're not smoking pot, but it's the brain's version of that, and it's administered in just the right way, just the right time. Yeah. And if you think about how far we've come and how creative and when great things are invented or thought of or new ideas come out, it's always a collaboration. The idea of a lone genius is probably overemphasized. Actually, even Einstein had to have a chat with someone else whilst out walking before their ideas came. So yeah, people that experience flow states report having more meaningful lives as a result of it. So yeah, cool. So that would then, if you have a meaningful life, it means that you'll probably produce a substance called gamma amylobutyric acid, which just acts on the parasympathetic nervous system. So yeah, you go out for a walk in the hills, having a great chat with someone, bouncing ideas around. You're allowed to be inquisitive longer, more coherent thinking, joined up thinking, if you like. And you feel great afterwards with bags of ideas.
You do. You do. And the other thing about it is it's free to go
Yeah.
outside. I think it's so.
Well, not if you go walking with me, but yeah.
That's
different. You're paying for the conversation there, not the walk as such.
Yeah.
But nature being such a great teacher and being so available to us,
Yeah.
and resourcing us is something that's free. And I often think that we undervalue things like that because we're not paying for it as such. We might not see that it can bring us something.
Yeah, I don't know. I think most people are, or maybe it's just a circle I'm in, because we do this. I go networking. I guide. I'm a mountain leader, so I guide networking for a company called Fresh Walks in Manchester. And yeah, funnily enough, the fresh walkers come at the end of the month. It's usually a hard walk at the end of the month. And the kind of research that Michael DePaolo had done on that was the fact that people at first came for the networking, but then it became a community. And actually, it was the community aspect that they came for. And you just hear the conversations that go on. It's just amazing. Everyone's in this flow state. It's a lot of people say that it's like a reset. Walking out in nature is a reset for the brain. And if they've had a hard month, but it's always the last Fridays in the month when the community network goes out. It's great. They absolutely love it. But similarly, we have a lot of clients now who are, sorry about the pinging in the background, my wife's phone, I forgot it was in here. So yeah, a lot of our clients are finding, we take professional services firms out, and what they're doing, they're finding that they might have taken them to the races or shopping or whatever, and just normal networking events, but they're actually finding that people are reporting afterwards, no, it's the time we went walking with you, even if it was raining, because you've had this shared experience. And it's about that, the fact that you have a shared novel experience together, you've done something together, and you've had a very powerful experience that's been backed up because you've been in this flow state, and you're not waking up with a hangover in an alcoholic type of way. So yeah, they're finding that of all the things that they do, going out walking in the hills with clients is much the best way to do it. If I'm going to meet a potential client, I don't, let's just meet somewhere for a coffee. I say, well, let's get out on the hill, and you'll see for yourself how it could benefit you and have a chat outdoors. And that has a more bonding effect, because obviously walking in nature also releases oxytocin, which is known as cuddle neurotransmitter or whatever. But what it actually does is bond people. And so, yeah, when you're out, it's a more memorable meeting, and more meaningful and more impactful. So yeah, aren't we all doing it?
I know. I did think about having this conversation while walking outdoors, but I think it would have just been too distracting when we weren't together. And because I have done one podcast recording outdoors actually, and it's just magical, isn't it, to be outdoors anyway? And I grew up beside the sea, and for me, you can solve everything by walking by the sea, even alone. And I wondered about that actually as you're talking about being outdoors and the silence, because there's a different sound when you get away from traffic.
Yeah.
The quality of the sound and the silence is very, very different. So I wonder, does that play a role as well, Murph?
Yeah, I would say so. If you think about traffic, it's quite a stressful thing going on in the background. There's a few things going on here. Well, for one thing, that when you get into flow states, you shift away from hypotransient frontalis, it's called, but it's like the default mode network of part of the brain. That closes off. And so you switch from ruminating to reflecting. You're not ruminating on the past so much. So that's one thing. I think when you're outdoors as well, there's not a lot of research on this, but since the Industrial Revolution, well, agrarian revolution, we've kind of gone backwards in our culture. So we've created hierarchies and things like that. Well, it's actually quite stressful to be in a hierarchy unless you're the leader. If you're the leader, you'll go into dominance behavior system. It's another part of the brain. But the opposite of that for the majority of people is the involuntary defeat system. When we take teams out in the hills, you lose that. It's more egalitarian. And as a result of that, people find that healthy. And then, of course, if you are walking in trees, for instance, I know they have like the forest bathing in Japan, and they put it down to certain chemicals in the air from pines and things like that. But also trees produce a lot more oxygen. You actually are taking an oxygen bath by going through woodland, for instance. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but there's various reasons why going away from traffic and going outdoors is going to be more beneficial. Better oxygen, you're going to flush the system out a lot quicker. Your glutamate's being refreshed. All these neurotransmitters are being refreshed, and it's more egalitarian. When you go outdoors, you're walking side by side. If you look at Rogeri and Carl Rogers' person-centered counseling, I think it was 6 core things about to be in a therapeutic relationship and how you should be, but 3 of them, 3 core skills, are the same thing that you get from walking side by side. You're not a therapist, you've just been authentic. And the fact that you're doing this walking, and also, as I said before, bilateral thinking, these are like 3 core conditions for a therapeutic thing. Acceptance, which you get when you're outdoors, whereas you tend to be less accepting when you're in a culture or a system that's hierarchical. So yeah.
And even metaphorically, I mean, it's not metaphorically because you are outdoors, but you've got the expanse. When you're in an office or a room, you are confined inside in the borders, and the color. I mean, our offices tend to be horrible, some of them without windows. All of that is having an impact on how our brain is processing. And we're seated. And like we said at the beginning, we started this off by the movement, and even a very simple movement is often like, if you're stuck at something, the worst thing you can do is stay sitting there trying to figure it out. Because the minute you move, even if you just go down the stairs and up again, you've shifted what your brain is paying attention to.
Yeah.
So there's a huge case, or there's so many reasons why we should be going outside. I hate to use the word should, but you know what I mean in the context of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what more I can say really to
I don't know, there was a question in there anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what more I can say to. As I say, there's a raft of transmitters. It'll increase your longevity anyway, so you'll be more effective for longer. There's the whole, do you want a lifespan or a health span? We want a longer health span. Getting outdoors and talking, your ideas are better because you're creatively collaborative. It's using the right side of the brain more, which sees things in more holistic ways. You're getting away from the stress of being in a hierarchical system. As we know, when you're stressed, one of the first things that happens is that your brain closes down, and you've got this level of anxiety. So even if you're in a hierarchical system, because that's traditionally what a lot of firms have always been like, you know, special forces tend to shun that kind of thing. But when you go outdoors, you give people a break from that. And it means that if you take a team out, you come across more authentically because you're outdoors. If you walk into an office, you'll be triggered and anchored into a certain mode of thinking. The involuntary defeat system might be that you don't want to offer suggestions if you're a team member because you don't want to get it wrong. You're scared of being made a fool of. Whereas you go outdoors, it's more egalitarian. It levels the playing field, and everyone can contribute better. And they're enjoying themselves while they're doing it. Even the days when you've had a really wet muck, what I call a muck and mayhem kind of day sort of thing, at the end of it, they're like, do you remember that time that we went and did that? People start panicking about the fact that it's raining, whatever. It's amazing how more impactful that is, because you've had this shared experience together. I mean, you know, the fresh walkers, they talk about the worst days more than they do the good days. Oh, do you remember that time? And then Mike had that like 1,000-yard stare in the pub afterwards, something. I'm sold. What about you?
Well, I have the benefit, I suppose, of having grown up in the countryside. And I do think that makes you, well, from my own perspective, just being outside and going outdoors and going for a walk, it was just in us. I cycled to school in all weathers for my whole way through secondary school. I was back in Galway recently where I went to university, and we were just talking about how you never left your digs without your rain gear because it was always raining. And that's, like you said, we remembered having to lift our bikes up over a hill, kind of up onto a bridge in the rain, pouring against you. But you did it. And I'm a firm believer in going outside. I suppose what I maybe where I'm less, I won't say convinced because that's not the case, is where there's a discrepancy or where maybe more reconciliation needs to take place is perhaps bringing some of my work outside. And it's really interesting. I've talked to quite a few people who work outdoors, and like you're doing yourself, Murph. And I think perhaps it's something that I need to look at a little bit more in my own work as well, because even as you were talking there about going into an office and imagining the same roles that you're in or afraid to say anything, often people are trying to bring about change. Right. But they won't even go outside and have a walk outdoors. They won't even change the scene because that's literally what you're doing. And like you said, it opens up so much more. And I wonder how much the working from home of an office environment impacts it. I don't know if you're frozen there. Oh, you're sorry. I thought you were frozen.
No, I was listening intently. That's why I was just on place for a period of time. So, working from home. Well, funnily enough, I don't know whether this relates to what you're alluding to. Is the problem with working from home and the problem that younger people have who have grown up as digital natives, perhaps, is the fact that they're gosh, we're going into a whole new thing here, but one of the challenges that we've got is with young people, and I know this is a generalization because obviously some are super athletes, but there seems to be a lack of resilience in the younger, gosh, I'm going to get in trouble here on the younger generation. Can I say that without getting shot? I don't know, but
I think life is easier in one way.
Yeah. So
there's less hardship. Let's say.
So there's good stress and bad stress.
Yes.
And the good stress is when you've got, it's actually down to dopamine, actually, isn't it? So dopamine, all technology and digital stuff gives us a boost of dopamine. But what happens is that you get the dopamine, and then as it goes, you get another every time you scroll or something like that, you're getting this dopamine. So eventually the dopamine stops working so much. There's that side of it. So as a result of that, people are feeling less happy because they're becoming resistant to dopamine. So that's one thing. There's also the other thing is that, the good thing about walking is that you are using up the insulin. We're also becoming more insulin resistant because we're not doing as much exercise. And of course, if you look at the body as a system, then all these things matter. And if you want to be healthy and effective, then it's useful to treat the body and work with the body as it was designed to be worked. For 200,000 years, we were egalitarian hunter-gatherers. We did 20-odd thousand steps per day as a general rule. And the idea that we had a horrible life then isn't quite true. Once we got over childbirth, we tended to live about the same sort of ages. We just had a more egalitarian, healthier lifestyle. And as a result, we're very effective then. And I think that returning to that and helping people to break free from maybe an addiction to staring at screens all day and that kind of thing would be more useful, more beneficial.
I think that's such a brilliant part to bring into the conversation, because I almost overlooked it myself in thinking about this, but our body, we focus so much on our brain in the workplace, and our brain is a part of our body.
Yeah.
But there's so much information coming up from the other parts of our body into our brain that's driving a lot of our focus and attention and decision making.
Yeah.
And getting our body moving or tapping into the intelligence beyond the brain is really only something we can do in a resourced state.
Yeah.
And in an office, they're just not conducive a lot of the time to being in that state.
Mm. I mean, yeah, people have done this for a while, though, haven't they? People like Google and one of our clients, Bruntwood, they do spend a lot of time creating the environments that are good for this kind of thing. It's almost like you've got an outdoor space indoors to some extent. But yeah, when we talk about things like gut instinct, I can't remember how many brains we've got, but we have more than one brain in the body. And as a result of that, again, it goes back to, if you want all those brains firing at the same time or firing in an effective way, working in an effective way, you taking care of your gut biome, and exercise does help with that. You'll have clearer thoughts, you'll be more creative, and so on. So yeah, it's almost like, sounds like a panacea, doesn't it? But it probably bloody is. So
but I think it's just so easy to take for granted. I think that we tend to take our bodies for granted until something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And we put all of our emphasis on protecting our brain or using our brain or focusing on our brain. And when you go for a walk, like you're talking about, the net walking, there's way more than your brain going on that walk.
Yeah. Your whole self is, isn't it? That's the thing.
That's the thing. Your whole self is involved.
Deeper ecology of mind, the ecology of mind idea. And also the fact that environments, you make different kind of decisions when you're in different environments. So again, we think decision making comes from us doing the decision making. But also it's impacted by obviously being with another person, but also the environment affects your decision making. And as I said before, things always look brighter when you're looking up, don't they? You could actually do an experiment. It's practically impossible to cry by looking up. So if you go to see a baby, I mean, obviously ask the mother first, but if you go to a baby and click above its head, the baby will look up and stop crying. As I said before, things are looking up. We feel better when we're looking upwards. If you're looking up and you're looking around yourself and you're using, great metaphors like you can't see your value. You'll be stood on top of your mountain. You can see everyone else's mountain and value, but you can't see your own. Is another great metaphor. But having that outside perspective really works. Yeah, I mean, the personal development industry started probably during the Sumerian times when we started journaling. They used alphabetical stuff. And it's that idea of disassociating from it. If you're trying to solve a challenge and you're actually within the challenging situation, then getting outdoors, suddenly you're outside of it, you're disassociated from that, and you could see it more effectively as a result.
Yeah, there are so many benefits. I never heard that before about the crying and looking up. That's really maybe try with adults as well, like but
yeah, well, it does work, but get the mother's permission first. But temporarily they will stop crying when they look up. I mean, they'll start again when they look down again, but yeah, it just shows it.
And even with kids or nieces and nephews, I have visions of them like looking up as well, because they do. Well, it's a distraction too, I suppose, isn't it? But the other thing about like what you said about being on the mountain or looking up, to me anyway, one of the most incredible things you can do is look up at a night sky.
Yeah.
And see the stars, and the going on for forever and ever and ever. I was lucky enough to be in South Africa there about 18 months ago now nearly, and we were out in the absolute wildest of the middlest of nowhere. And there was very, very little light pollution, a tiny little bit from Cape Town, but other than that, there was nothing at all. And I mean, it was just endless, the stars in the sky and the planets and so on. And I was blown away by, I'm just like a little speck.
Yeah, completely shifts your perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, It really does. And the awe as well, that sense of getting outside of your own head, because our own thinking is what causes a lot of the world that we live in anyway, and being able to see the world differently. You cannot do that inside the confines of your own home in that way.
Absolutely. There's feelings of amazement and wonder, and it's kind of euphoric, isn't it, when you're doing that in that sense of awe. Yeah, it's and again, it's all stuff to do with being, as you say, outdoors. It just seems to increase your inquisitiveness to ask questions in a different way, and following the Stoic idea of spending more time in dialogue. When we're stuck in an office type thing, you have like affirmative conversations, which are the divergent conversations, the yes ands. Yeah, we can do that, we can do that. It's driven mainly by the mission. So you go from divergent to convergent. Okay, let's make a plan of action. What do? Execute the plan of action. They even use that kind of word, don't they? And it's all this military thinking where it becomes emergent. And what they don't do is go, well, actually, what if? And you find that hunter-gatherers do this more. They sit around and discuss it for longer, and we call that dialogue. And it's that deeper understanding. If you're in an office situation and you're trying to solve a problem, you're probably wrapped up in the culture of the office, and so therefore you're going to think in a certain way. Take it outdoors, and you're allowed to be inquisitive longer. You different perspective because you're outside the perspective, but also you are outside, and it's a bigger picture orientation.
It just reminded me, I was doing a leadership development course, and the group, we sent them outdoors with their camera or their phone and said, take a photo, something outdoors as a metaphor for what's going on now. And I think there were 15 people in the room. Every single person took a photo of something completely different. And it helped to solve something in a way that they wouldn't have thought about it by looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, you touched on kind of constellation. I call it wayfinding. Again, like constellation stuff, you can get, often use seashells or rocks and things like that. Well, arrange this group of rocks or pebbles in a way that helps you understand it. But again, because you're outdoors, you tend to be more creative in that respect. So yeah, you can either have 1,000 post-it notes on a wall, or you can take them outdoors and use a bit of a twig here and something there. All the stuff that you need is out there if you want to do that kind of thing.
That book, Wayfinding, have you read that?
I haven't, I don't think, no.
It's absolutely fascinating. I can't remember the name of the author now, but it is, I mean, he talks about how if we don't keep up our wayfinding, like if we're always using the GPS, say on our phones or our cars to get us places, we're going to undo our own intelligence that we have spent forever building up now. But he talks about a whole lot more. And one of the most fascinating chapters in that book for me was about the psychology of being lost.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to the same kind of psychology we have when we're stuck at a problem at work, and we keep going around the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. But a fascinating book to read, actually, about getting outdoors, wayfinding.
Is that the Australian guy, Tyson Young Kapoor?
No, it's an English guy. I just can't think of his name right now. I had the book here because I was going to talk about it on something, but I think I returned it down to its rightful place.
Yeah,
it's not lost.
I mean, wayfinding. Part of the other work that I do is teaching wilderness survival, which again is another way of bushcrafting and wilderness survival, but also using natural navigation, things like that. Yeah, it's incredible how much more choice and options you have. The person that has more choice in a system tends to enjoy more success. And by taking people outdoors, by using wayfinding, we tend to have a smaller map of the world. So when you get outdoors, you're in this resourceful state. You start to open up your internal map of reality, and you're able to explore more as a result of that. Yeah, good stuff.
Great. Murph, I never got to ask you about Stoic Philosopher, or because I think or Stoic Pilgrim, that's the name of your Instagram account, I think. But for the purposes of people listening who definitely want to hear more about what you have to say, where can people find you?
Just put Murph Wild Coaching. You'll probably come up with me on LinkedIn or the website, martinmurphy.coach, and Stoic Pilgrim. I like Stoicism because of it's a basis of CBT sort of thing, but so that was useful. And Pilgrims, I work with my old regiment on the health and well-being side of things, and ex-SF guys are called Pilgrims in a certain branch of the regiment. So Stoic Pilgrim was like, oh yeah, but it's also that idea that we're always moving. Life is a pilgrim. We're here for a short time. We're a process, not a fixed thing. And that's the idea of Stoic Pilgrim. It makes us more paradigm flexible. And I think that we need to be levers of potential. So when we're looking around, what can we use as a lever of potential? How can we lift people up, and getting the mind and body working effectively together is one way of doing that. Totally.
Thank you so much, Murph, for really, we went on a lot of different paths there today.
Yeah, I'm lost now. How do I get back?
Round and round, a few of them from a different angle, but we definitely went on different paths. So thanks for exploring your work and the benefits of it with me today.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining me today on Life Beyond the Numbers. If something in this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. It helps others like us discover this podcast and join in our conversation. Until next time, keep exploring the human side of work life.